But anyway, shameless plug out of the way. That's enough of me talking about my kit. I want to get cracking on. And the first thing that I want to talk about in this video is something that got me feeling incredibly nostalgic. Plus, it was also linked to probably one of my favorite matches of the entire week at the Kumamoto Masters. I'm, of course, talking about the women's singles, more specifically, Nozomi Okuhara and Ratchanok Intanon. So I'm going to start this section off by talking about Nozomi Okuhara. Now, Nozomi Okuhara got a lot of attention from the media and from fans past week in Kumamoto Masters. And obviously a big reason for that is that Kumamoto Masters is a Japanese tournament and Nozomi Okuhara is Japanese. So, of course, if she does well, then she's going to get... Naturally, there's going to be a lot of attention upon her. But more than that, it's because Nozomi Okuhara is an incredibly decorated player. She's a player that's achieved almost everything there is to achieve at badminton. She has been world number one. She's won the All England twice. She's won the end of year finals, like the World Finals. It was called Super Series Finals when she won it. She's won the World Championships. She got the Olympic bronze medal. Yeah, like I said, list of achievements goes on and on and on. She was an integral part of the golden generation of women's singles that we constantly get heard talked about. Something I always mention, and she was someone who was at the heart of that golden generation. She was one of the top players. However, over the last few years, we haven't really seen her playing at the highest level, or the level that we know that she's capable of. You know, a big reason for that is that she has been struggling with injuries over the last couple of years. I believe it's been more issues around her calf. And it's always been a case of we've seen glimpses of Okuhara possibly refinding her form, refinding the kind of game that we know that she's capable of, only for her to have to retire, or suddenly there's a post from her saying that she's got the issues have flared up again. And so there was constant setbacks for her. She'd constantly you'd see glimpses and you'd be like, yes, Nozomi Okuhara is coming back. Such a lovely player to watch. And then there'd be an issue with her calf, or there'd be another injury, another setback, constant setbacks. So the fact that the way, obviously we could look at this tournament and go, well, she reached the semi-finals in the Kumamoto Masters. Great result. She beat Akane Yamaguchi, the current world champion, in the second round. She pushed Ratchanok Intanon, a player who's just made it back into the top 8. In the semi-final, she lost to her in 3 games and had a great chance to win there. We could easily look at this and go, well, it's one tournament, but what if the injuries flare up? There's always going to be that little bit of doubt. I hope that's not the case, because the way that she was playing this week, she looked physically better than I'd ever seen her. And that goes, actually, I would say, almost throughout her whole career. She looks leaner, she looks fitter, she looks incredibly quick on her feet. Her defensive footwork was great. She's obviously always known for someone who fights for every single shuttle. I mean, she's similar to Yamaguchi in terms of stature, very small, so retrieving is a big part of the game. But she also looked incredibly sharp in her attacking shots. I think her reverse slice and her straight slice, both slices from her round the head corner, always been 2 great shots of hers. I would say that they looked as sharp as they've ever done, especially the reverse slice. It was coming off her racket super quick, but dying really close to the line. That's an incredibly difficult shot to do, and Nozomi was doing it consistently well. So she was kind of playing the kind of badminton that, I've recently done a video on her, actually looking at her world final from 2017. And so I watched quite a lot of matches from her early days and from like 2015, early 2016, when she was getting some of her best results. And I would say what she did really well there was she kind of blended her defense with her attack, and it was looking really sharp. What I saw of her this week in Kumamoto Masters was similar, if not possibly better. Because I don't remember how old she is. She's probably 29 years old. I think she's a year older than Akane Yamaguchi, so she's not crazy old. So she still could potentially have a few more good years left in her, but she just looked physically really good, quick on her feet, light on her feet, moving well. There seemed to be no issues with said calf injuries. So with that in mind, I really do hope that obviously she can take the level that she produced and she can go on. I will talk about Ratchanok Intanon in a second. She set a goal of getting back into the top 8 in the world, and she's achieved that now. Maybe next year it could be the turn of Nozomi Okuhara to get herself back into the top 10 or the top 8. And I think watching the way that she played throughout this week in Kumamoto, definitely is possible. Definitely 100% possible. Be interesting to see. I think she's playing this week in Australia, a tournament that she has had some good success in. In fact, I think before she won the World Championships 2017, she was having a bit of a tough time again with injuries, actually. And the last tournament for the Worlds that she actually went and won, gave her lots of confidence, was the Australia Open. So it's going to give her good memories, that place, that tournament. So maybe she can build on the semi-final, and we can see. I could be talking about her again next week. I really do hope that I can. Now, the last thing I'll say about Nozomi as a person before we get into kind of her match versus Ratchanok Intanon, her semi-final, which I'm sure you all want to hear my thoughts on, is that another reason why she got a lot of attention is, like I said, with the injury setback she's had, but for me, that is a theme throughout Nozomi Okuhara's entire career. She won the World Junior title in 2012, and then in 2013 in the Malaysia Open, she injured her knee against Simon Newell and had to withdraw, and that injury actually required surgery, so that put her out for a little bit. Then she came back, had a really good season. 2014, 2015, 2016, doing really well. Got the Olympic bronze medal. I know that she was a bit disappointed that she couldn't have done it better in that semi-final against Sindhu. But at the tail end of 2016, she started to have issues with her shoulder, which really knocked her in the early stage of 2017, but came back from that, like I said, to win the world title in 2017 with one of the best finals I think we've ever seen of women's singles. And then, like I said, she tried to go on. She was really motivated to try and obviously lift the Olympic crown in Tokyo. But that didn't happen. And then obviously since then, I think she's been really struggling with the injuries to her calf, and that's what brings us today. So Nozomi Okuhara is not just a fighter on court, but off court too. She hasn't given up. And what makes it actually even more special is that I think over the last year or two, she's actually started to play much more of the lower level tournaments, the Super 300s, even the Super 100s. And actually, before this Kumamoto Masters, she played 3 Super 100s and won them. So I thought, for someone who's achieved, like I said, everything, world number one, all those kind of accolades, to go, do you know what? I'm not going to give up. She could have easily just gone, oh, this injury keeps coming, keeps coming. Maybe it's time for me to call it a day. But she's persisted. She dropped down the levels to allow her to get more confidence. And you could see that. I mean, in the early rounds, I know she beat Yamaguchi in the second round, but she had a tough first round. I think it was against Pitchamon or Pantniput, another young talent from Thailand. And I wouldn't say that she was flying around the court looking really positive. She kind of, if you watch her matches as she goes on in the Kumamoto Masters, she was growing in confidence. But those wins at the Super 100s definitely gave her that good foundation. And yeah, so it's just a really lovely story if you actually look into Okuhara's story and all those kind of things. The thing that she's been through the last few years, what she's done, kind of the humility to bring herself down to those lower levels, and hopefully, really fingers crossed, that the result we saw this week in Kumamoto Masters is just the beginning of a Nozomi Okuhara resurgence. I know a lot of people would love to see her make a comeback because she, like I said, she's a player from the golden generation. And there's still a few floating about. Another one, obviously, is the player that she played in the semi-finals, Ratchanok Intanon. And those two had an absolutely, it was their semi-final was just really lovely to watch. Two players, they've got completely different styles because they've got different builds, but technically two of the best badminton players I've seen technically on a badminton court. There's from that golden generation, there's loads that you could argue could have the best technique, but Okuhara and Intanon have got beautiful, beautiful technique. So when they were both playing really good badminton this week. What it brings, what it makes, what it creates is a fantastic match, and that's what they did in the semi-final. I do think that Nozomi Okuhara had a really good chance to actually win. She had a huge lead in the first game. She was playing so fast, so quick. And that's something that Ratchanok does struggle with because her movement, her weak area is definitely more her defense and especially the shots which come land in front of her. She's not super comfortable at moving the long diagonals or having to get down low in front. And that's an area that Okuhara, like I talked about with that reverse slice, and she's got other slices and drop shots, and she can also punch a clear really, really well. So that big court kind of attack is something that Ratchanok doesn't tend to do too well against, and it was something that was exposed in the first game. But for whatever reason, Ratchanok was able to get herself in to the game. She was obviously able to kind of claw back that deficit and was able to take the first game, and that was quite decisive. Now, for Ratchanok, I think she actually did that earlier in the tournament against Zhang Beiwen in the third game. So maybe she had the belief that even if the scoreline, I can't remember what it was something probably like, I think it might have been 19-12 or 18-12 or something. But Ratchanok, like I said, was able to do it early in the tournament. And in that first game, she was able to rattle off 9 straight points. And I've wrote in my notes here, it was a mixture of errors from Okuhara, but also good Ratchanok play. In the second game, this is why I think obviously Okuhara had a good chance to win, is that the second game was all Okuhara. She kind of didn't let that, right, it could have easily been like, oh God, I've just thrown away that lead. But no, she came back, refocused, and played more of the fast stuff. But that in the second game didn't quite didn't let Ratchanok back in. In the third, it seemed to me at the beginning that Okuhara was going to kind of maybe have another, was able to pull away again. It started like she was in control, and it didn't seem that Ratchanok had many answers. She was just one step behind, wasn't able to dictate. But I think the pace, I think having not played at this level for a while, you could see a little bit of. I spoke about how Okuhara's physicality looked stronger, looked better. She definitely did. But I think playing at that level, playing at that intensity, maybe she isn't quite used to that under those tournament conditions. Because in the third, I think her pace dropped a bit because she was a little bit tired. And that just allowed Ratchanok in. And then combine that with the fact that Ratchanok played in that third game some of the most accurate badminton. Her attacks were laser focused on the line. She hit some clears that you honestly couldn't have walked around there and placed it on the line better. And not only that, is that she followed in very well. I think she started to get confidence from the fact that her attacks were getting more accurate, so she was more. She knew what kind of reply she was going to get from Okuhara, and she could really come in and capitalize. And she kind of ran away from it there. So in the end, it was, like I said, Ratchanok that came away with the win. I think for Okuhara, that losing that first game was quite critical. But it was, like I said, it was a brilliant match, really good. It was a real throwback. I felt like there was some nostalgia for me. Those two players have played each other since the junior days in 2011. I think they first played in the semis of the World Juniors. I can remember watching that video on YouTube. Someone had some camera footage, and obviously they've played each other multiple times over that. Okuhara does have the advantage, and I can see why, because the way that she can play can expose some of Ratchanok's footwork weaknesses. And it seemed like she was doing the same in this tournament, but just wasn't able to sustain it. Final thing, obviously, about Okuhara, I already said this. Ratchanok Intanon set a goal at the start of this year to make it into the top 8 and qualify for the World Tour Finals. She's done both of those things, and I really hope that maybe we can see next year Nozomi Okuhara do the same. I think the way she's playing, she definitely can. So I obviously want to finish this little section off talking about the final, because Ratchanok was able to back that semi-final win up by winning the final and the title against Gregoria Mariska Tunjung of Indonesia. I will talk about Tunjung a little later. There's plenty I can say about her. Someone asked a question about her, and I just think let's keep this section nice and concise and leave my thoughts on Tunjung because, it was quite an important tournament for her as well. Now, in the final, for me, I hate to say it, but I think a big part of Ratchanok being able to win was Tunjung committed far too many errors. I think I didn't count them, but based off the top of my head and from what I can see, almost half of Ratchanok's points in both games were errors, and they came at some bad times. I think there was a moment in the second game where Sin Tunjung got the game level and seemed to be finding her rhythm, finding her game, finding what was working. And then she ran like a spate of 4 errors. I think there might have been a few service return errors as well in that. And that just opened up the gap and gave Ratchanok the belief that she can carry it home. Because like I said to you about where Ratchanok struggles a bit is moving the long diagonals and moving to the tight front court, whether it's a deceptive hold or a sharp drop shot or that kind of. Those are the kind of shots that Ratchanok does struggle with, and they're the kind of shots that Tunjung can play very, very well. But she just wasn't able to do them consistently, and I also think Tunjung wasn't able to link her shots together as well as, say, Ratchanok was. I said about what she did against Okuhara, where she'd attack and she'd follow it really well. She did more of that in the final, and that's something that Tunjung wasn't doing. I think there's a big reason as to why Tunjung couldn't, and that is that this year she's been really struggling with illness. She's had vertigo, and it seemed early this year that she was getting over it, and then it's kind of flared up again. she was supposed to be at the BXL event but had to withdraw due to illness. So she's had a bit of a rough time of it. So I understand why her shots and everything weren't flowing as well as they could have done. So yeah, no, a great win for Ratchanok Intanon. And also, like I said, she's confirmed her spot. It should, I think, this week's rankings. I'm filming this on Monday. So tomorrow when the new rankings come out, she'll be in the top 8. So she's ticked that goal. And I know that she was quite keen to qualify for the World Tour Finals and even admitted that she was doing the mathematical calculations as the week went on. And I think this win secured her spot at the World Tour Finals as well. So be interesting. I think she is supposed to be playing the Australia Open, which whether she will actually withdraw and go, right, let's give myself a little bit, maybe rather than playing that week, take that week as a rest, and then obviously prepare for the World Tour Finals.